When I'm on a 24-hour goon sesh, I love to pop one made of 100% natural, ethically sourced spinal fluid. And it's more eco-friendly when it comes straight from an electrolyte harvester.
I've been craving a Cyberpunk game after playing, well, Cyberpunk, and I don't want to do a fourth one. In comes Deadlink. I've been meaning to play a fast-paced boomer shooter like Doom, which is an apt description for this game. Cyberpunk means Doom, as well as it being a roguelike. Also, keep in mind, I haven't played other games like this, so take things with a little bit grain of salt since I don't know how exactly those elements compare to those games, but for me, the gameplay is really good. I was always hesitant to play these type of games because I know how I am, that it would probably overwhelm me and be constantly thinking about, even when I'm not playing a game, how to beat it, and rage while bashing my head against the wall, spending hours trying to beat it, avoiding other responsibilities in my life. But actually, it was a good amount of chaos, not overwhelming. I was whelmed. It was a good level of stuff. What actually surprised me though is the pretty good like dialogue paired with the voice acting is also really good. It's more than meme side in terms of the writing, which for some people might get a little annoying, but for me I found it very entertaining. And instead of just skipping through what every NPC slash friend said by just reading subtitles or buying what I needed, I actually sat there and listened to what they said. The characters, well, Rumiko will actually give you tips on how to beat the bosses if you die to them, and it doesn't feel like it's a tutorial where you're just kind of, getting like explained at. It actually feels more aligned with like natural dialogue, or call you trash if you die to regular enemies. The game consists of going through the same 4 levels. As I said before, it's a roguelike, which if you're unfamiliar with how that works, it's whenever you die, you are sent to the beginning, or whenever you finish the run, there are some random gears and perks you get through your runs. You have 4 shells, which you have 2 abilities and set primaries and secondary heavy weapons, although you can switch out the secondaries to even other shells ones, and there's also elemental versions of those ones with added effects that just don't do different damage types. They actually have like modified ammo types, like modified ammo, or how the actual gun works is changed. All the shells feel pretty different in terms of playstyle, besides maybe Soldier and Juggernaut. The Soldier, which is kind of mid unless you get it upgraded, which refunds a cooldown if you kill enemy you grapple on, which becomes then really good. You can swing around the map at like Mach 5 because it's very mobile. Like you can basically go like on a full ass sulker whenever you actually attach or something. It also marks the enemy, which is going to be your actual method of sustain in the game, as killing marked enemies gives you shield and ammo back for your secondary and primary. Although you do have a limited primary, it just loads something back into the gun. You also do more damage as you get more upgrades alongside the tree. The second ability is like a stun shockwave thing. It also does a little bit of damage. Also has a pump action shotgun as its primary. The Hunter has a hand cannon, and it isn't the best shell now. Well, it's probably because I'm not very good at it, but whatever. Really good against bosses, but doesn't have a ton of sustain at base unless you have your modifications for it, either shell mods or implants, although there isn't a ton of implants to do it, and the modifications you get to your shell aren't going to help too much, although I mean, at least help. Your first ability is the only one that actually has marking naturally, which is just a single mark 2. It switches places with an enemy, also slash a teleport, and it does stun them, so was that has a good amount of mobility, and that will guard. And its second is a decoy slash invisible, which will draw fire, and even after you come uninvisible, you'll still actually have enemies typically be shooting at it. And that's the other way to get your targets to get marked, is through a modification. But at base, and even with the modification, it doesn't have a ton of sustains, which means not much shield, and you're also not going to be getting a ton of your heavy armor back. At least your primary is really good, and depending on what modifications you get for it, like increased headshot damage, you can really shred things. So definitely carries a different playstyle that I'm not particularly good at, because I'm not very good at aiming, but it works for you. Engineer is probably the best and most consistent of the shells, as it works pretty much well with any implant you get. It has a radio mark that also is a point and click stun, which explodes with skill power damage when you kill the enemy. With this alone, with the right implant, you could just nuke enemies with it. And a turret, which can get a bunch of useful upgrades. It has an auto rifle as its primary, and particularly useful because there's quite a few implants that work with just how often you're shooting, which it's an auto rifle. It tends to do that a lot, and naturally has a really high reload speed, or low. It reloads fast. Lastly, the Juggernaut has a sawed-off shotgun, which I kind of think is a worse version of the pump action one. You get a flying punch, which is quite fun, that does damage, stuns, and marks, and a radial force field thing that stops projectiles from hitting you and sends out a shockwave that marks and does damage. And I want to be able to do a skill power build with this shell, but the game just doesn't want me to for some reason. Because whenever I do play it, it just doesn't give me the implants I want. But whatever. I don't really think any of them are bad, even though I'm not very good at Hunter. I mean, if you can hit your headshots, it's pretty good. And with more upgrades, you can definitely do some stuff with it, particularly the final upgrades you get with the shells. It shreds things, and it's just because I developed spontaneous Parkinson's. So, if you don't have broken fingers, you can probably do pretty good at the Hunter. The gameplay overall feels really good. The movement with dashing of abilities and some guns pushing you back, giving you a method of movement, but also making the gunster just really strong and chunky. The gun sounds, the particle effects, and getting covered with just tons of blood. That paired with a really good soundtrack. Although I am a sucker for synth music like this, so a little biased. I personally would like it to be, it's a little bit more heavy, in the music. But I mean, it's also good that it's there to complement the game. It's probably also good that the soundtrack isn't like super, you know, overbearing or just like it's very apparent, because game really has a lot it's throwing at you, so not having other extra layer added of stimulation is probably a good thing. And the game also runs really well. It's been out for some time, so maybe before there was bugs or issues, crashes, whatever, but ran flawlessly. I do have a more high-ish NPC, and the requirements aren't super high, so that also could be it. I also really love the art style. Of course, Cyberpunk is always going to look good to me, and I think it had like a, I would say it's like a cell shaded kind of look. I'm not sure if that's correct, because I'm always really hard to define exactly what the genres are in terms of like look, but I'm pretty sure it's like a cell shaded thing. The effects look great. Now I do have some more problem with the level design, or maybe like difficulty of each. Now it could be that like it was meant to challenge you in a different way, and just could be that I find the first two harder than the last two. But the first one and the enemies, mostly the sumo ones, are just like just offers more of a challenge to keep you on your toes. The sumos will always chase you and have a very strong front-facing shield, and depending on your shell slash build, can be very difficult to deal with. The artillery robots and the teleporting knife ladies. The boss fight level, more so in the last phase, you're guaranteed to come out a little health, as having a constant laser attack, as well as the ads shooting you. The second level is Y. The regular, just normal chaff enemies can chunk your ass. I mean, they aren't super accurate, but still, they're also really tanky. Just actually, all the enemies in this level are tanky, like more so than even the other like last two, which is I think a little odd. There are also these drones which make these suicide bombers, and just yeah, they're pretty strong too. And the killing the ones that actually make the suicide bombers isn't too hard, but they also are fairly tanky, and you still gotta deal with everything else shooting at you. So still is an issue. You have these acid launcher boys, which aren't too much of a threat, but if you're not really paying attention, they can do a lot of damage really quick. And these big hammer boys that chase you. So yeah, at least the boss isn't too bad. I mean, when I first was fighting him, I had an issue with him, but once you really just sit there and realize what he's doing, he gives a lot of opportunities to attack. His attacks are very telegraphed too, and he's just not that bad actually. Once you, especially, it took me way too long to realize that don't shoot the shield, because it's gonna reflect attacks back at you. But yeah, at least he's not too bad of a boss. There are going to be normal enemies spawning, which are going to provide a challenge, but that one isn't too bad at least. But the normal enemies, for some reason, just do a lot of damage, are really tanky, more so than the last two, which I feel like is kind of weird. I feel like it should be the other way around, but whatever. Maybe each one, like I said, it's meant to be like a different sort of challenge, and maybe I just find this one particularly more challenging than the other ones. I just have easier time. Could be that, but yeah. The third is it's just fairly easy. Like the only issue being these manic enemies that will take sea balls, which also give you ammo. And I forgot to mention they're also like you destroy them with your implant, the build, all of that fun stuff. Anyway, they do a lot of healing and can be pretty difficult to get around and break the thing, since it they like to run away, and they also usually will, like, if you get close to them, will actually face like towards you and make it hard for you to actually be around them. It's sometimes be facing the back to like the wall and surrounded by enemies. That can be kind of a trip, but most of the time they're pretty easy to kill, and that's like really the only threat in that level. Even the boss level 2 isn't very difficult, and only really some of his drones, which are the weakest I think out of the entire game, and none of his attacks are really that bad. It shifts the arena around, and you might like fall some acid floor, which doesn't really do that much damage. You see his big right spear of death. Don't be in there. See if lasers just move, it doesn't track you like in that it just stays in a set pattern, unlike the first boss, which the lasers do indeed track you, and you gotta stay in a fairly small lane to not get hit by them. So yeah. The last level are all boss floors, each floor making the final boss weaker, besides the first one, which unlocks the final boss. She's not too bad, although she does have moves from other bosses, and I think even from other shells. Like, I know she'll deploy a torrent, or I think depending on which shell you're using, she'll use those abilities against you, which, I mean, it's not too much of an issue, but, it is something she will do. She's pretty mobile, does a lot of damage, but once you know what she's doing, not too hard to go against, just that she's fairly hard to hit because she's actually like more person size instead of being like a massive tank or like hulking dude. Actually, yeah, a massive tank and hulking dude are basically the bosses in the game. So yeah, the normal arenas aren't too bad either. The bosses in there aren't really that bad. Some of them have like little mechanics or whatever, but for the most part, just kind of just big enemy that do damage, and that's really it. The only really issue is like maybe like the larger arenas with the ads, which is only really one type. Will have a lot of gunfire, but most of it's a sniper fire. And if not paying attention, which you can pretty easily see the lasers of where they're aiming, which is not too difficult. And most shells have ability to move really quickly, so getting to them within large arenas isn't that hard. Last one actually isn't that bad. I personally think the first two are harder than the last two. That might just be I find it easier or whatnot, or maybe because usually at that point you can have implants that can have a build that's pretty strong. So maybe it's just that. I don't know, but it does feel like that's really the only issue of the game is that I feel like the devil stays more front loaded than towards the end, which should be the other way around. But I mean, it's fine. But for 25, I got a little over 35 hours. There's still builds for me to try. Other two game modes I haven't even really touched, and achievements for me to get if I so wished, and thoroughly enjoyed my whole time. I highly recommend the game. Again, keep in mind I haven't played other like fast-paced shooters like this, so maybe comparatively these aren't this isn't as good, but I really enjoy the roguelike features, the art style, the music, just the overall vibe of the game, movement, gunplay, all that feels really good, and I highly recommend it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and hopefully found it was helpful or entertaining or something, I don't know. And yeah, have a good day. Bye.